When I was 6 or 7, my family once moved to a new place, and parents told me to maybe take some toys and go get acquainted with the local kids. I did my best. I gathered my favorite dinosaur figurines and approached a group of boys that played in the sandbox. It turned out I was not ready for what awaited me. Everyone had car toys. There were excavators, tanks, and transformers, but the general mainstream toy was a car, and I was a weird alien. I tried to establish social contacts to the best of my ability, but the end game that the boys came up with was to play dinosaur car crash roadkill with my figurines, which didn't feel like fun. I ended up playing paleontologist with myself, alone in the corner of the sandbox, burying my dinosaurs in the sand and then digging them out. Now, a couple of decades later, I kinda still have this passion about dinosaurs, like probably more than a quarter of channels that I am subscribed to here on YouTube are about the extinct animals. And I read fresh paleontology news as often as I read regular news. And well, since I do a science fiction themed YouTube channel these days, it was probably just a matter of time for me to make a dinosaur sci-fi video. This option also won in the last channel poll, and well guys, I'm pleasantly surprised that this time I'm not alone in this sandbox. I hope I will manage to both entertain those who are new to the dinosaur topic, as well as maybe tell something new to those who are in it for years, like me. So first of all, what is a dinosaur? An easy answer would be it's a giant extinct reptile. While it's not entirely wrong, this definition would be too inclusive, because that's not a dinosaur, 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 and that's not a dinosaur. So then, what is a dinosaur? Well, it is a reptile that belongs to a group of so-called archosaurs, along with crocodiles, pterosaurs, and birds. Dinosaurs appeared in the middle of the Triassic and ruled the planet until the end of Cretaceous, when the asteroid struck and everything bigger than a rat went extinct. Dinosaurs can be divided into two main groups based on their hip structure, the Zooreschia and the Ornithischia. Actually, the bone that is positioned differently is not ischial but pubic bone, but I suppose Zooropubia and Ornithopubia would kinda sound weird. Anyway, so the Zooreschia, the lizard-hipped group, consists of two of the probably most iconic types of dinosaurs: sauropods, the long-necked herbivorous giants, and theropods, the bipedal hunters. Ornithischia, the bird-hipped dinosaurs, was made up of a ragtag crew of different armored dinosaurs and the bird-beaked varieties. The exact evolutionary relationship between ornithischians, sauropods, and theropods is currently being questioned. There was a paper in 2017 where some scientists proposed to unite theropods and ornithischians, introducing the clade Ornithocelida and leaving sauropods alone. But in the same year, some other scientists published a paper where they reviewed the results and methods, reviewed the dinosaur bones once again, and in the end concluded that everything kinda stays as it was for 130 years already. But in that same paper, they also agreed that early dinosaurs were kinda all very damn similar and are hard to distinguish, so we might as well consider a third possibility: that ornithischians actually are closer related to sauropods. Birds, by the way, count as dinosaurs as well. I always found it surprising that despite having beaks and bird-shaped hips, birds do not actually belong to ornithischian, bird-hip clade. Birds originate from the lizard-hipped theropods. Their ancestors were small raptors that learned to live in the canopy of the forest. They evolved more compact pelvises that were better suited for the airborne locomotion and lost their teeth to reduce, according to different hypotheses, either their body mass or development time inside the egg. As a result, birds kinda started looking like bird-hipped dinosaurs a bit, but they reached it on their own, independently, which is called convergent evolution. A common plot point for dinosaur-themed sci-fi movies is that dinosaurs somehow survived to our days, and well, such a movie absolutely does not have to be science fiction, because dinosaurs have totally survived, as birds. What about the others, you might ask, those that biologists call the non-avian dinosaurs? Well, to answer that question, we should go back to the hypothesis of the asteroid that supposedly struck our planet 66 million years ago and left what is now known as Chicxulub crater. The impact raised tsunami waves that could evaporate even the northern wall from the Game of Thrones, and these waves kinda went around the whole planet several times, destroying most of the plants along the way. The explosion also raised so much stuff into atmosphere that it became dark for quite a while, and plants could not recover. Larger pieces of that explosion-ejected stuff were raining from the sky for a while around the globe, and then there were acid rains, but darkness was the worst. It killed a lot of phytoplankton, which made extinction in the oceans as bad as on the land. With the base of the food pyramid devastated, everyone up the food chain, that is, everyone who survived the catastrophe so far, was now facing starvation. One group of animals was able to benefit from that all, however: the saprophages. Saprophages feed on decaying matter, the corpses of plants and animals, and there was quite a lot of such material around for a while. Fungi, which are one of the main saprophage groups, exploded in numbers during KPG, and at certain point they were probably the dominant life form on Earth. Among the animals that survived, most were burrowers with generalist omnivore diets, and almost all were small-sized. It was evolutionarily advantageous to survive on as little food as possible. Crocodiles circumvented this size limitation because of their slow metabolisms. They can survive without food for years. But dinosaurs were not so lucky. Unlike crocodiles, non-avian dinosaurs were active, warm-blooded animals that needed food regularly, and they were unfortunately very huge. Except for some theropod groups, like birds, which were small-sized, dinosaurs generally occupied almost all available niches of large terrestrial animals, like mammals do nowadays. When forests and plains stopped producing greenery, dinosaur herbivores went extinct, then followed the predators, and the last ones standing were possibly giant scavengers, the Hexagopterid pterosaurs, which were actually not dinosaurs. A lot of other large species that were not dinosaurs died out in the oceans, like mosasaurs and ammonites. For years, there was a harsh, dark, brumal, ultraviolet, post-apocalyptic wasteland all around the globe, and all life on Earth got affected by it, and the largest got hit the hardest. It is curious that around the same time when Chicxulub impact occurred, there was a hotspot of volcanic activity, the Deccan Traps, which are now located near the west coast of India. They made up the west coast of India 66 million years ago as well, but at the time, India was in a very different place. It was halfway drifting from Africa to Asia, and there were yet no Himalayas. Deccan Traps were not just your average valley with volcanoes, but like a sea of molten lava with occasional rock pieces drifting around. Deccan Traps began several 100,000 years before the Chicxulub impact and continued for several 100,000 years after, and they kept adding dust and toxic gases to the atmosphere in a constant mode. Once, I looked at this whole situation with my work eyes and noticed something curious. The thing is, to pay my bills, I work in the field of forensics, and there is such a forensic phenomenon as countercoup damage. It happens in cases of blunt force head trauma when some object strikes the head and causes brain contusion, but not just where it hit. There is sometimes an even bigger contusion on the opposite side. There are several theories that explain why it happens, including but not limited to force transfer through the skull, through the fluids of the skull, or through the brain itself, through deformation of the skull and acceleration of the brain. In truth, there is probably some complex combination of these effects happening all at once, but the end result is certain. brain gets hit kinda twice, where the skull is hit and on the opposite point on the surface. So, funny thing, at the moment of the Chicxulub impact, 66 million years ago, Deccan traps were surprisingly close to the opposite point of the planet. There's a region of volcanic activity known as Reunion Hotspot in the middle of Indian Ocean, which also, by the way, appeared 66 million years ago, and that's exactly where India was at the time. I am well aware that it is very far-fetched and not very scientific to apply knowledge of the forensic pathology to the paleovolcanology, but if I had to make a bet, I would say that Reunion Hotspot and Deccan traps were a direct result of Chicxulub asteroid strike, a counterimpact damage. They look suspiciously so. Modern science, however, is pretty much adamant on the fact that Deccan started long before Chicxulub and could have just worsened after the impact. I have no formal education in geochronology and will thus not argue with that. Either way, Deccan traps and Chicxulub impact both definitely happened, and together they made everything worse, and it was global, it was in the air. Is it possible that some remote corner of the world stayed untouched by this change and provided a safe haven for dinosaurs to survive? No, I'm afraid it is not. Given the combined effects of Chicxulub impact and Deccan traps, even the most remote mountain valleys would get affected. Climate change was global, and the collapse of the food chains was global as well. None of the non-avian dinosaur fossils were discovered from after the impact, so that would mean that all the giant dinosaurs survived plots, such as in iconic Lost World, have to go to the cake tier of scientific plausibility. Lost World was written in 1912 by Arthur Conan Doyle, the same guy that wrote Sherlock Holmes, and it was one of the first books to become a movie, as early as in 1925. Lost World places surviving dinosaurs on a tepui, an ancient plateau in South America, isolated from the world around it and containing life forms from the ages long gone. Sadly, real-life tepui are very poor in nutrients and, consequently, in plant life. In fact, quite a lot of tepui plants have to retreat to catching insects just to keep surviving up there, and the largest representatives of tepui fauna are spiders, earthworms, frogs, colibri, and swifts. I mean, such a world would be no doubt incapable to support even a very modestly sized non-avian dinosaur. If some dinosaurs somehow happened to get isolated and survive there on a plateau, they should have gone through the same changes as they would on an island with limited resources. I have already discussed island dwarfism in my King Kong video, but for now, in short, big animals need a lot of resources and thus big territories, so if they get cut off on an island, they gradually become smaller. We know very well what happened to real-life dinosaurs in island isolation, actually. There was an island named Hatzek in the Cretaceous, located around modern-day Romania and Hungary. A lot of dinosaur skeletons uncovered there were surprisingly tiny. All the herbivorous dinosaurs on the island looked like babies compared to their continental relatives, and their top predator was not a local variety of theropod, but rather a giant predatory pterosaur. So that means that dinosaurs isolated on some skull island would not become bigger, but will rather switch to horse or even sheep size range. Some sci-fi worlds provide dinosaurs with enough space to live and thrive in isolation in some mysterious underground habitats, some variety of Hollow Earth in most cases. I've spoken a bit on Hollow Earth in my video on Wrong Earths, but for now, in short, it is not physically possible and belongs to cake tier. So, to sum it up, none of the non-avian dinosaurs can survive tepui, and if they get isolated on an island, they shrink in size. But none of it matters anyway, because none could have survived the Chicxulub-Deccan combo. Only smallest of the birds did. But maybe we can still have an island with dinosaurs, given the recent advancements in genetic engineering. What if we get some dinosaur DNA and use it to de-extinct some real-life dinosaurs? Can we build a real-life Jurassic Park? Well, sadly, the problems begin on the get some dinosaur DNA stage, and those problems are pretty much insurmountable. DNA is a very complex and fragile structure, and the oldest DNA recovered up to date is no more than 2 million years old. All the dinosaur remains we have are fossils, and those are not the real dinosaur bones, but more of a geological formation that developed over time where bone was. It's not like there's no DNA left in a fossil. There's no original bone left, just its shape filled with minerals. As of insect fossils in amber, well, in most cases these are just dry husks. And even in the best case scenario, you can only detect trace amounts of proteins that might prove there was blood, but certainly no readable DNA. If dinosaur genome was a book and DNA was text in it, 66 million years would be like shredding that book into pages, that tearing each page apart to paragraphs, sentences, words, letters, and then burning all that remains. So, sadly, dinosaur DNA in by itself is as much a cake-tier thing as all the other options we discussed so far, and is not gonna happen. I am sorry, the correct way to put it would be we can't get non-avian dinosaur DNA, but nevertheless we still have birds. And what would you say about tinkering with their genomes to unscrew them back into the dinosaur mode? There is actually a real-life guy who does exactly that, and he looks a lot like you would expect from a maverick scientist. His name is Jack Horner, and he is known for several groundbreaking discoveries in dinosaur development, as well as for consulting the original Jurassic Park. In fact, the man might have actually been an inspiration behind the character of Dr. Alan Grant. So, what he does in the recent decades was dubbed Chickenosaurus, and if the project is ever gonna succeed, its end result is gonna be a species of chicken-sized raptors, which you can use for experiments, for making cool videos, or simply keep as pets. The initial idea of the project was to unlock the atavistic genes, those that have survived in genomes through even millions of years of mutations but are not currently in use. Some limited success was achieved in reverting bird beaks into mouths with teeth, as well as legs were reverted to the more reptile-like condition, but then Horner got to the elongation of the tail, and it didn't quite work. It turned out some important dinosaur genes did not just get blocked, but kinda got lost entirely, and we can't just get back the tail. The arms and the posture would be the next crucial changes, and these might not get preserved in genome as well. It is still possible to achieve it all with genetic engineering and/or hormonal influence, but it will take extra time, so it seems like we're not gonna get pet dinosaurs anytime soon. Anyway, even if Mr. Horner or someone inspired by him will one day succeed in creating the Chickenosaurus, it will not be a true dinosaur. I mean, not one of those that lived 66 million years ago. Those are lost irreversibly. We can only squeeze some ancestor traits out of the birds, but not magically turn them into their ancestors. That would mean we probably cannot hope to restore any other type of dinosaurs except for theropods. But on the other hand, we have quite a variety of birds to work with. I mean, if there one day will be Chickenosaurus after all, there will probably soon appear some Ducksaurus, some Penguinsaurus, and Ostrichsaurus, and we might even actually squeeze some real-life raptor out of some condor or eagle. Despite how amazing that perspective might look, I must, however, ground it down a little bit in the depressing reality of the situation. The depressing reality of the situation is that possibly trying to downgrade some animals to their long extinct shape is not the main task we should be concentrating on these days. There are thousands of amazing, beautiful, real-life animal species that are going to become extinct right here and now if we don't do something about it. We can, of course, collect their DNA and preserve it in perfect conditions for future cloning, or we can even translate it all into code, like digitize the DNA book. Yeah, we fortunately can do at least that, but it would be very nice if we wouldn't have to retreat to that. Chances are, however, that we will be storing more and more recently extinct species in our DNA databanks, given the recent shifts in global politics. Russia never really gave a damn about ecology, and that only got worse since it started the war. In Western world, populists and far-right started to come to power, and they often did so at the expense of the Greens. The renewable energy is not a priority anymore anywhere. Apparently, we are returning back into the age of burning hydrocarbons. All that while the global average temperature has exceeded 1.5 grade already and keeps growing. Without humanitarian aid from USA, a lot of peoples in less successful countries will have to turn to their land for extra resources, and that will bring even more rare and amazing animals to the brink of the extinction. The consequences of all that can be felt quite well already, but it seems like we won't stop until Texas, California and most of Europe will turn into Sahara, all the polar caps will melt and flood all the shorelines, and everything close to the equator will be a blazing inferno. Actually, I was thinking about someday making videos on climate apocalypses and authoritarian regimes in science fiction and reality. I'll leave these as options in my next community poll. And speaking of Chickenosaurus, regardless of its moral issues and despite the current challenges, I would rate it as at the very least tungsten tier, hard sci-fi, which makes it the only real option how we can get real-life non-avian dinosaurs. There are actually also other angles to look at sci-fi dinosaurs. If, let's say, Jurassic Park somehow managed to get their DNA and grew them, are the end results realistic? Do the movie Dinosaurs correspond to what we know from real-life dinosaur fossils? Answering that question would take a separate video, as well as I have an idea of another prehistoric fauna video, something like Triassic Park or Permian Park, presenting a cast of creatures that could have probably appeared in such a movie. If you are interested in any of these video ideas, write about it in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like, and if you'd like to see more like it, subscribe. Thanks for watching, stay hardcore, and see you in the next video.